Welcome to the Freedom to Start Fresh podcast. Here I'm joined by Amelia, Lynn, Warchal. She's an attorney in Boca Raton. We work at the same law firm. I've known her for a couple of years now. She's smart, she's knowledgeable, and more than anything else, she's just an all-around nice person. So Amelia, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much for having me, Kunal.
Well, it's great to have you here. So like I said, we've known each other for a little while now. You're smart. You're an incredibly nice person. And I'm sorry, but you're going to be in the hot seat today because we're going to jump right into things, hard-hitting questions. So are you prepared, Amelia, Lynn, Warchal?
Prepared as I'm going to be on a Friday morning.
Okay, so first tough question here. Amelia, Lynn, why do you have two first names?
So I'm from Massachusetts, and it's a much more common thing up there. And my parents' thinking was, oh, if you ever get married, you can make your last name your middle name. And well, I did that, but I had been practicing I got married, but I've been practicing for a really long time, so I just kept it.
So your last name became your middle name?
Would become my middle name was my parents' thinking.
That it'll be that way?
Oh,
but
no.
it's not Lynn Warchal, it's Amelia Lynn.
Yeah, my first name is Amelia Lynn. And as I tell everybody when they ask me, because I do get asked, oh, what do you go by? I'm like, the only person that calls me Amelia Lynn is my mom when she's really mad at me. So,
as is usually the case with parents, right?
exactly.
So you're originally from Massachusetts, born and raised, or how did you?
Yeah, so I was born in Plainville, which is about 2 towns over, and grew up in Plainville, which is about 2 towns over from where the Patriots play.
Okay.
In Gillette. And then I ended up coming to undergrad at Barry University in Miami Shores. And then I went back up north to go to law school at Suffolk. So
What brought you all the way from Massachusetts down to Florida?
I mean, it was Miami, and I got a really good scholarship. So it was kind of one of those things where this makes the most sense, knowing that I was going to go to law school.
All right. So then you went back up after college.
Yep.
What was your degree in? What did you study?
So I have I double majored in history and pre-law when I was in undergrad.
Why? Okay, so I can understand law as to where you ended up here, but why history? What drove you to history?
So when I was younger, I kind of wanted to be Indiana Jones, and I really like all of the,
As we all do.
right? So, but I really like history is something that I've always really liked. And I mean, I have more books than I can count in my house, but it's just been one of those things that's always interested me because I do think to a certain extent, those who don't learn from it are doomed to repeat it. And that's kind of where that all went. When I was younger, it was, I want to go and explore the pyramids and I want to learn all about that. And it just kind of transitioned when I was like, well, I can get a degree in this. And it does dovetail with, okay, I want to go to law school.
So what period of history is your favorite?
So most of what I did in college was actually from 1648, which is the Treaty of Westphalia, to pretty much like the early 90s was most of what I took in class.
That's a good chunk of time.
Yeah, well, and it's an interesting chunk of time, too, because you have all of the, you get a lot of revolutions going on and the world changing and opening up and all these new colonies and trade stuff getting pushed.
All right, so let's rank it. Favorite revolution to least favorite revolution. What's your favorite revolution?
I mean, okay, like to a certain extent, you have to go with the French, with the American,
Lots of
right behind
beheadings.
that.
Okay.
So.
All right. So you finished up college and then you headed back up to Massachusetts?
Yes.
What were you doing?
So I took a year off in between and actually worked in a law office, which I do recommend if anybody is actually thinking about going to law school so that you have a clue as to what's going on when you're actually there. But yeah, I basically went right after that, went in and did my law degree in Boston at Suffolk University, which was great. I mean, speaking of history, it's also right across from Boston Common, which was really, really nice, and started practicing right after I passed the bar.
Why? So why law school, or why law to begin with? What about it drew you to want to practice it?
When I was younger, it was because I really do like debate and arguing with people. And I mean, it goes with the territory. And especially if you're doing litigation, you kind of have to have that mindset because of the fact that that's a big part of what your job is ultimately going to entail, whether it's in writing or verbally. You've got to be able to, state your position and then defend it.
So what do you prefer more? Do you like the oral debate aspect of things, or do you prefer the writing aspect of things? I feel like this is probably a conflicting issue, being a history and major and wanting to write things down.
So I actually really, I like getting in front of a judge and making an argument, especially because you have to be quick on your feet. You have to know your rules. You have to know what you're doing when you're standing up in front of the judge, and being able to rebut somebody's position when it's something you may not have heard before. You have to have the right skill set to be able to do that.
So you graduated law school. You're in Massachusetts. Where do you go next? What was your first job out of law school?
So
what were you doing?
I graduated when everything was crashing and ended up at a small firm in North Andover, which is just north of Boston.
Wait. Sorry. Could you say that again, please?
North Andover.
Ova?
Yes.
Is there an R in there, or is there no R in there?
There is, and the firm did mostly personal injury, but I kind of ended up doing a lot of different things.
Like what?
So I did the personal injury. I was still I was doing family law, but it wasn't the majority of the practice. I did some family-based immigration, some bankruptcy, and then low stakes criminal work like OUI ones or small time possession of marijuana for the most part. So I did
I take it was not legal at the time.
At that point in Massachusetts, no, it was not. But yeah, which actually worked out really well, because there's a couple different ways I think when you're a new attorney that you get experience. It's either you've got somebody that's over you that's reviewing everything, or you kind of get thrown in the deep end of the pool and figure out if you can swim. And to a certain extent, I got thrown in the deep end out of the pool, and 17 years later, here I am. So, but it gave me a lot of courtroom experience pretty early on.
That's not usual. Most attorneys come out of law school and it's going into the back room.
Right. And I wasn't doing that. I had my first hearing 2 weeks after I got admitted to practice in Massachusetts.
What was your first hearing?
It was a motion for temporary orders in front of Judge Randy Kaplan, and it was support and time sharing on that one. So I went in, and I had part of it too was while I was in law school, I had worked during law school and was working for somebody that did criminal and family. So it wasn't like I went in and had no clue just because I got out of law school. I had been drafting and working. The only thing I hadn't been able to do because I wasn't admitted to the bar was really go in front of a judge and make an argument.
So what drew you from, you got this broad range of experience. I'm sure you were dealing with lots of different people. What drew you to go into family, to really start specializing in family?
I'm an adult child of divorce. So my parents got divorced when I was 20. And I'll be honest with you, when I entered law school, I was like, there is no way I am ever going to practice in family. It's nasty. I don't want to get into it. Well, in between my first year of law school and second year of law school, I needed a job. And the attorney that I was working for, his split was criminal and family. And I found out that I was good at it. And I think because of my experience, I'm able to relate to people that are going through it on a different level in some cases. And now the divorce rate is 50% of marriages at this point are ending in divorce. And so I think it's a little bit different, but it helps you understand, and it helps you. We're attorneys, but when you're dealing with the family type issues, you really are looking at, you've got to be kind of a counselor too, and you've got to be able to get people through this and make connections with them. And that's something that I'm good at.
So you're kind of drawn from your personal experience into getting into family.
Yes.
And the firm that you were with, did you start doing more of it, or did you switch firms, or how did you kind of make the transition into leaving behind the criminal stuff and the bankruptcy stuff and really focusing in? How did you go there?
So I had picked up more cases by the time, because I worked at my first firm for 3 years. And then after that, the firm that I went to only did family law. And then my last firm, I worked there for 5 years. And my last firm in Massachusetts, that I was a partner at, we did family and employment, but I only did family. So that's basically what I've been doing since 2011 at this point.
So your family in Massachusetts, how did you end up in Florida? I mean, I know that most people from the Northeast end up in South Florida, which is, I think there's a statute on that, but if I'm not mistaken, could be out there. But why do you come back down to Florida? How do you make the transition? I mean, I remember sitting for the bar exam, and that was something that I don't want to go through ever again. It wasn't fun. Why go through it again?
So part of it was my husband was really, he's like, I can't do another New England winter. And I was like, okay, well, if we're going to go somewhere, I'm going to go somewhere that I know people, because I still have a bunch of friends from college down here. I've got family down here. And so I decided, all right, I'll do it. And yes, I had to take the bar exam again.
When did you take the bar exam again?
So I was originally going to take it in July of 20. And obviously everybody knows that the world kind of stopped, and I couldn't, because I couldn't get anything that I needed. There was a bunch of things from my law school and the bar in Massachusetts that I needed to submit. So I ended up taking it in July of 21. And
Okay.
I took it remotely. I think I was the last remote administration for Florida, which...
How was that? How do you take the bar exam remote? Just sitting on a laptop? How do they know you're not cheating, or you don't have a team of lawyers on the other side, not where you can't see, whispering in your ear?
So they have ExamSoft, which, again, I mean, I took in 2007. When I took Massachusetts, all of Massachusetts was handwritten, but we could take law school exams on the computer. I didn't, because I figured if I was going to have to write the bar, I might as well just practice. But yeah, they have this program called ExamSoft. They set it up on your computer. It locks you out of everything. And then, just like we are now, they're video recording you for the whole exam. And
So Big Brother.
Yeah,
Big Brother is how they're doing it.
Pretty much. That's exactly how they do it. And the only thing I was able to have on my desk was a clear container that had water, nothing else, which you've been through the bar exam. You know that scratch paper is important.
It is. No scratch paper at all.
No, I mean, they have part of the program where you can like make notes and things like that. But other than that, like which takes a little bit longer depending on what you're doing than just to draw diagrams. But yeah, I mean, I made it through, thankfully. I didn't have to do it again. I was a one-shot deal, which is pretty much what I was looking for. So, and I like to think that I got lucky, because my particular year when I took it, one of my essay questions was family law. And I was like, okay, I can do this.
So you passed the bar exam again, and you come down here. Were you in Boca Raton, or where did you go?
So I was down, before I came up to Boca, I was down with a firm in Miami that did mostly family for about a year and 8-ish months. And that was right downtown, like on Biscayne.
Now, eventually you made the smart decision to come to Klein Law Group. Now, I might be a little bit biased on that, but you decide to come to Klein Law Group. What drew you to Klein Law Group? What makes this place special for you to leave a Miami firm?
So part of it was the right opportunity. I mean, honestly, it was the right opportunity at the right time. And I think, having met everybody that was here, it's a really good group of people. I mean, it's a really good group of people. The support staff and the support that I think that we have here is first class. And it just felt right. I mean, it was funny, because when I can remember interviewing with Eric and happening to look him up, as you do before you're interviewing, and because he had gone to law school in Massachusetts and practiced in Massachusetts, like, we had a connection, because it was like, I think we might actually know some of the same people still.
So being here, nice people, there was a connection to Massachusetts, and it felt like the right fit.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that I'm glad. I mean, I've been here for a while now, and I'm definitely glad that I made the transition that I did.
Well, we are too. I am too. I love having you in the office. It's a lot of fun. And you're just not only smart and knowledgeable, but you're just a nice person. But speaking of not nice people, divorce can be pretty nasty sometimes. So how do you deal with the nastiness of some of these divorce cases?
So my kind of guiding premise with a lot of this is my job is not to make this harder on anybody than it needs to be. And there's no way around it. It gets nasty in a lot of cases, and there's a lot of emotion that's involved with it. You can't get around that, especially when you're not dealing with, okay, it's just a money problem where everybody knows that there's a number that nobody's going to like, but everybody can live with. When you're dealing with the child-related issues in children, it really can be, it can be devastating. And I think that I go into each case with the idea that, okay, I'm going to get ready for trial because that's what I need to do. But my goal really is to try and get everybody on a path that's going to let them get through. In some cases, when I'm dealing with really young children, the next 10 or 15 years.
That's right, because it can last for a long time. So how do you balance the trying to find a resolution to maybe somebody comes in and they're angry? Mm-hmm. How do you control that? How do you manage somebody who's more angry than solution oriented?
Part of it is
actually, let me rephrase that. I'm sorry to interrupt. How do you manage somebody who's more angry than solution oriented when they're not your client, when they're on the other side of the fence?
So this is where it comes down to, I don't like to burn any bridges, and I like to try and really have good working relationships with most of the attorneys that I've dealt with. And this is kind of where it's a little different down in South Florida than it is in Massachusetts, because in Massachusetts, the people that practice family law in the same area that I was practicing, which is most of Eastern Mass, a lot of us already know each other, and it's a much smaller bar. So you have those kind of relationships where it's like, okay, this is the 5th case in the last 2 years I've had, with this guy, Don, or what have you. And part of it is managing relationships with opposing counsel. But part of it comes to, look, if you have somebody on the other side and the other attorney does not have client control, because that's a big part of this. The biggest part of this job is managing expectations and maintaining control of your client so that you can get them to the point that they need to be at. But when you have somebody on the other side that doesn't have that, you have to be prepared to litigate, and you have to be prepared to go to the mat if that's what it's going to take, because there's only so much that you can do in a negotiation context to try and resolve something. If you have somebody or both parties, because I've had it happen where it's both clients, everybody's dug their heels into this entrenched position, and there's no way that they're going to get out of it without having a third party, whether it be a judge, sometimes it's a mediator, tell them, this is really what needs to happen. This is what I'm going to do.
So it sounds like your reputation in this industry really, really matters. And I could say in terms of your reputation, like I've had people come to me in the courthouse and in various networking things that I do and say, we like Amelia. Amelia is really nice to deal with. She focuses on getting things done instead of fighting about things. And so I think you have a stellar reputation.
Yep.
I don't know if do you hear that too? Do other attorneys give you compliments sometimes on that?
Yeah, I think the best compliment that I ever got was I had the opposing party, and it was a friend of mine actually that was representing her when we were doing her divorce. The opposing party referred one of her good friends to me. That's one of those moments when you're like, okay, I've made it.
That is great. So you had the other side refer you somebody else. So it's definitely hire Amelia before your spouse does.
Yeah. And again, it's just you have to be prepared, and you have to tell the clients this from the get-go. Like, you need to be prepared to go all the way, but realistically, the goal is to get you to this point where things are resolved without having to put everything in front of a judge that really doesn't know you. And that you lose control over what's going to happen once that, you guys are waiting for a judgment and all of the evidence is done at trial. It's completely out of your hands.
What do you think is the most difficult aspect of handling a family law case, whether that's divorce, paternity, enforcement? Can you give an example of maybe one of the most challenging things that you've had to do?
The cases that the ones that I have taken to trial, and the ones that usually end up going to trial, are where you have two parties that are diametrically opposed on some child-related issue. I mean, I've had one where we had a parent who was, I'm not going to vaccinate my child. And my client was like, well, no, I want to do this and wanted to homeschool. And you have a binary function. And that's where and if nobody's moving, you have to take that to trial. So
How did that case work out?
my client ended up with custody.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
My client ended up with, it was a crazy case because it started out with my client, who was mom, having supervised time sharing because she went to somebody else before she came to me and signed an order that she should not have signed. And
so you had this client who started off with supervised time sharing and then went to you and came back, and at the end of the day,
yeah,
custody.
She had all decision-making authority relative to education and medical, and she had the majority of the time with the child.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, and those are the ones that, I mean, I've had other ones where I've had cases where I have somebody that comes in and the other parent has said that they're abusing the child without actually straight out coming out and saying it, and having DCF involvement. And my guy was on supervised time for a long time. And the case took years. And part of it was just the way that hearings go in family law cases as far as trials, but it took a really long time. And this is somebody who was a really good dad, was super involved with the kids, and it's just, those are the cases where you do everything that you can to try and get them to where they are supposed to be, just because of the fact that after a certain amount of time when you've been doing this, you can kind of tell when your client's not exactly being truthful with you and where there are things that the other side is saying that may be true. But when you have those cases where and 90 pages of a guardian ad litem report that basically say there is absolutely nothing here, those are the cases that make it worth it at the end of the day, when you get the judgment that says, like, this is not how it should have been.
So getting that judgment at the end of the day, is that what is the most rewarding aspect of what you're doing?
I mean, in those types of cases, it's being able to pick up the phone with your client and say, look, you have equal time sharing with your child, which wasn't codified realistically until 2023, July of 2023 down here. And it's not necessarily codified like that in Massachusetts, but it's saying that, all of this that you went through and what you've been fighting for is actually worth it. And those are the cases, like I said, those are the ones that I will take to trial, because if you're dealing, when it's the money related issues, yes, there are times when you absolutely do have to do that. But for the most part, that's where it's a numbers game. It's not nearly the same level. And it doesn't matter if it's $50,000 or $50 million to a certain extent. There's numbers that people can live with, that everybody knows, like, okay, this is what it's going to be going forward and I'm going to be fine. As opposed to, you're going to be having a significantly less time with your children, or it's going to be something that's supervised with a step up. Or, I mean, I've had the converse where I've had people on the other side that are dealing with some pretty decent substance abuse issues. And I'm representing the party that doesn't have that, and telling them, like, look, we've gotten what we need to be able to let you protect your kids. And we have a plan going forward, because that's the other thing. I mean, again, some of these judgments and some of these things can be, when you're dealing with kids, they go until the children are 18. So you could be dealing with a really long time period where you have people that are having to either co-parent, or you're having a parenting plan and dealing with custody for another 10 or 15 years after the judgment enters.
So you mentioned these laws that get codified and recently changed. What do you do to stay up to date with all the changes?
So I'm a big fan of CLEs, and there's a big conference in Florida every year, and it's usually the last weekend or close to the last weekend in January. That's the Family Law Review course, and I try to go to that every year. And then I do, especially when I'm a member of the CLE committee for the family law section, but they do case law updates and statute legislative updates every year so that you know what you need to know about to change that's changed. And I'm part of, like, I actually did a presentation for my group on the National Association of Divorce Professionals about, okay, this is everything, because it hadn't been done in a while, but this is everything that's changed since July of 2023. Because it does make a big difference when you're in how you're approaching certain things now, especially with respect to the child-related issues and alimony, because that was the other really big change that just went through.
So well, you keep up to date because you're studying it, but more than that, it sounds like you're educating other lawyers on it. So you're the teacher on this.
Yeah, to some extent. I mean, the NADP has its other professionals too. So because you have to, in this particular area of practice, you are dealing with other professionals. You're dealing with real estate brokers. You're dealing with real estate attorneys. You could have criminal issues that have come up. You're dealing with financial planners, business valuation people in a lot of cases, because you have to. And they need to know too what's going on, because if your alimony has now changed and you're conceivably going to be entitled to less than you would have been or more than you would have been under the old statute, and you have somebody that is an alimony recipient, they're probably going to want to talk to a certified financial planner so that they know, okay, if this is what I get and this is what it looks like, what is that going to allow me to do in the future? So they need to know, and they're looking to the attorneys to be able to say, okay, this is what the settlement looks like. This is why. Where do we go from here?
All right. I think that's amazing to be able to have that kind of experience all packaged in one person. But now I'm going to switch gears a bit. I've got some rapid fire questions for you.
Boy.
What I'd like you to do is I'm going to ask you the question. And in fairness, I didn't come up with these questions. I'm going to ask you the question. I'm going to ask you to repeat the question and then answer it.
Okay.
Okay. Are you ready? We're going to keep this down to like 45 seconds apiece. All right. So some of the common questions that you get in a divorce case, somebody who comes in the door and asks, how long is this divorce case going to last?
Okay, so the question is, how long is the divorce case going to last? And in typical lawyer fashion, the answer is going to be, it depends. Just because of the fact that if you are able to have a case where you go to, everybody does what they're supposed to do. You get the mandatory disclosure that you're supposed to get. I don't have any questions. I don't really need to go digging too much. And we get into mediation. Could be, 60 days to 120 days. If you have a case that needs to go to trial, you're looking at conceivably up to a couple of years. And part of that is based on the schedule with the court. Now, they run on an 18-month track, but divorce cases in general, but the issue is scheduling is always a problem. So if I called today to get a full day trial in Broward or West Palm, they may be telling me, okay, we'll see you in September.
Okay. So going on that, next question, how much is this divorce case going to cost me?
So how much is it going to cost? Again, it is also a situation where it depends. And what I usually tell my clients when they come in is it really depends on how nicely everybody's willing to play in the sandbox and what we can resolve and what we can't resolve. Because obviously it's a lot different than doing discovery and going to one mediation than having to go into court multiple times to establish temporary orders, to chase somebody for discovery, to compel depositions, and all of the dragging through the system, let's say, that you may have to do if you have somebody on the other side who's a little more recalcitrant to get the case done.
So another question, can my child's mother or my child's father keep my child away from me?
So the question is, can the other parent keep a child away? So typically the answer is going to be no. It's a little different when you're dealing with married couples as opposed to unwed couples. Married couples, everybody has equal rights to the kids. Until there's an order that says something different, that's what you have. When you're dealing with paternity, they changed this recently as well. Part of it depends on what's been filed and what's been acknowledged as far as who has rights to the child. So it may be easier for a mom to do that before there's a filing. But realistically, once you're in court, you're going to have, unless there's a really good reason why, like you have domestic violence issues, you have substance abuse issues, the judge is going to tell both parents, your child, not even you guys, but your child is entitled to spend equal time with both of you.
So what happens? Somebody comes in and says, I haven't seen my child in months. What do I do?
So if they're coming in to me and it's been months since they've seen the child, again, part of it depends on where they are in litigation. If nothing's been started yet, I'm filing, if it's a paternity action, filing a petition to establish paternity and to get filing a motion for temporary time sharing. And if it's a mom, temporary support conceivably. And if it's a divorce case, depending on where they are, conceivably filing a motion for temporary orders to be able to get time sharing established while I file the petition.
Somebody comes in and says, I don't have a prenup. Is my spouse going to get half my stuff?
So if somebody does not have a prenup and they come in and they're worried about having to give half their stuff, it depends, because the way that Florida looks at things is you have two really important dates when you're figuring out what is the marital estate, which is the assets that are going to be divided between the parties. And you're looking at what did everybody have on the date of marriage and what did everybody have on the date of filing. So my answer to that is going to be different if I'm looking at a 20-year marriage with no prenup as opposed to a 2-year marriage with no prenup.
So what does custody mean?
So, and this actually varies slightly state to state and how they term it. But custody to me, as far as what custody means, but custody has conceivably two parts. You have what's the time sharing going to be and where's the kid laying their head at night? And then you have who gets to make decisions. And for the most part, the decision making is going to be shared. And especially down here, if to have one parent have sole parental responsibility is what it's called, you have to show that there's an active detriment to the child by having joint parental responsibility. And typically what that means is it's choices about education, medical treatment, religious upbringing. It's not the day-to-day decisions that you're going to be making for a child if they're with you. And the other side of that, which sometimes is termed physical custody, is really the time sharing. It's what is that schedule going to look?
So how much time, if somebody comes in and says, how much time am I going to be able to spend with my kid? How much time am I going to get with my child?
So if somebody's asking how much time they're going to get with their child, right now in Florida, I tell them, well, the rebuttable presumption is that you're going to be spending half the time with your child and the other parent's going to be spending half the time with their child.
How do I determine what the child support's going to be?
So as far as how to tell somebody how to determine what the child support's going to be, it's a formula. This is actually one of the easier aspects of what we have to do. So obviously there's some figures and some wiggle room. If you have somebody that's self-employed, it's a little bit harder than, okay, here's somebody that's got a W-2. Because what it is a formula that's established by the legislature to say this is how we're going to do it. There's guidelines that you plug in. Gross incomes for both parties. There's certain deductions that are allowed. And then the other biggest factor that goes in is how many overnights is the child spending with each parent. And then you run the formula and it gives you a number. And that's your presumptive guideline.
What about, do I get alimony or am I going to have to pay alimony?
So as far as if somebody's coming in wondering what they're going to get or if they're going to have to pay alimony, this goes back to they just recodified the law, and it depends on what the incomes are for the parties. The foundational kind of start is always going to be, is there a need for alimony and is there an ability to pay? Now, if you have somebody that's fully meeting their needs, they don't need alimony because that's one of the things you have to show. But the way that the statute works now, in most cases, is going to be you're looking at an alimony amount that's up to 35% of the difference in the parties' incomes, and that's your best day in court, or the recipient's need, whichever is less. So once I get a handle on general ideas about what is somebody's income and what does that look like, I can tell, okay, this is what you're going to do, at least as far as durational alimony goes, because there are a couple other types that somebody could conceivably be entitled.
What about somebody comes in, do I need to sell my house because of this divorce?
That's actually asking if they need to sell the house or if they can keep the house is actually a really common question right now. And if somebody's coming into me for an initial consult, in a lot of cases, it's too early to tell for sure. They can tell me that, yes, this is my goal, is I want to do that, but in a lot of cases, it's very premature at the outset to say, okay, this is manageable. And part of that is the market right now. Part of that is the interest rates right now, because it makes a big difference if you have somebody that bought years ago and they're at somewhere between a 2 and a 4% interest rate, let's say, and now all of a sudden it's 6%, until you know what support looks like, whether they're paying it or receiving it, it's really hard to be able to say this is something that you are going to be able to sustain long term.
I think my spouse is hiding assets. How do I find them?
So if you have somebody that thinks that the spouse is hiding assets, in some respects, it's harder to do now because you have a lot fewer industries that are dealing in cash, because that was the easy way to do it. Typically in a situation like that, if I've got somebody that's concerned about it, what I will do before I go and have my client spend a lot of money that may not get them anything is we take a first run through discovery. If they have their own business, I'm going to be asking for business records so that I can take a look at them. And I'm not an accountant, but I've been doing this long enough that I know what to look for. So when I need to call the accountant, I can tell them these are the issues. And if need be, and they seem like they are hiding things, we'll get a forensic involved to be able to opine as to this is whether it's hiding income and funneling it into different assets, or we think that there are other business ventures that he's actually a part of. That's where they come in and are able to say, this is what we think it is. And there's also people that can do high-level asset searches to be able to see what we're actually looking at. But once you get the first kind of glance through what the other side has produced, that's when you take the next step if it looks like there are issues as far as trying secret assets.
What's the craziest asset that you've seen hidden, or the craziest way an asset has been hidden throughout your career?
I mean, I've had a bunch of them where like somebody tries to buy something for the girlfriend so their name's not on there, and there's definitely been money funneling out of accounts for a decent period of time. And this is, again, it really depends on the discovery. I mean, I had somebody that bought a house, or the girlfriend bought a house, and it took a while to trace everything back, because depending on how certain things go, you could have multiple layers of, okay, I'm going to transfer it, and that's what happened in this case. I'm transferring to another family member. That family member is transferring to the girlfriend or what have you, to be able to get this property. So you have a couple of layers that you have to go through to be able to do that.
All right. Last question. I promise. Probably the hardest question of all. Is it chowder or chowda? And if it's chowda, where did the R go?
Okay, so it is definitely chowda, and I'm pretty sure they threw it into Boston Harbor with the T. Okay?
Well, it was great having you here. I really appreciate your time. And for our listeners out there, please tell us, how do we get in contact with you?
So I'm at Klein Law Group. The phone number is 561-353-2800. And my email is awarchal@kleinattorneys.com. And it's AWARCHAL at Klein, KLEIN, attorneys, ATTORNEYS.com.
All right, great. Thank you for joining us on the Freedom to Start Fresh podcast. It's been a pleasure. And to our listeners out there, we'll see you next time.
Thank you very much, Kunal. It's been great.